So a couple videos ago, I started out with this picture of the soon-to-be vice president of Brazil, a woman named Manuela. I guess it's pronounced Davila. I had mispronounced it, so apologies there. And I chose this picture for a very specific reason, to kind of tweak some folks out there that I know are huge fans of Alex Jones. And of course, because they've been listening to that guy for God knows how long, they see trannies everywhere. They see transsexuals everywhere they go now. It's probably just something they, little wish they have in their heart that they probably don't wish they had. But the funny thing about it is that after I had, 6 or 8 or 10 comments about, that's a guy, that's a guy, that's a guy, I thought for sure it would be appropriate now to show um, this is the exact same woman who got in trouble for breastfeeding her son in open assembly in Brazil. So very, very much doubt that you are looking at a transsexual of any kind. But it just goes to show you follow Alex Jones and that's what you're going to see everywhere you go. Now, literally immediately after Lula da Silva endorsed his former running mate, Fernando Haddad, Haddad went from being down 4 points to being up 4 points in the polls and is going to run away with this because all of the other candidates down here, Gomez and Silva and all these, were just basically waiting. All the people that were supporting them were waiting to see what happened with Mr. Da Silva, whether he was going to be allowed to run or who he was going to endorse. And you can see it reflected in the polls here. That in July he was down by 4 when people still thought Da Silva was going to get out of prison. Now here in September that he has pulled out of the race and endorsed Haddad, he's up by 4 points and he will be taking this quite handily. Now, the reason that's important, we're going to go kind of a different direction. There was this report that came out in the last year or two about the Air Force's desire to put in a light attack aircraft, smaller, cheaper to operate, but all of the missions that they said they wanted to complete with this aircraft, and there were 4 of them that were in the running. They got down to 2, and I think they're going to decide in December whether it's going to be the Super Tucano A-29 or the AT-6 from Textron Beechcraft. All of those missions could be done with drones, attacking hideouts of drug lords and spraying crops of drugs, reconnaissance, this type of thing. You would think they wouldn't need a manned aircraft to do this. And real quick, this was the first one. This was the Scorpion, fastest and highest service ceiling, but it's a jet, not a propeller-driven aircraft, so they ruled this out. And then, of course, we've covered this before at length, the Super Tucano, used all over the world. And then we have the AT-6, the Beechcraft. And then they also had this one, which is basically just an armored-up crop duster. But they're using this one in the Yemeni Civil War. It's a workhorse, and it can take a punch, and heavily armored, and very maneuverable. So it was definitely something to be considered, but they did get it down to this aircraft or this aircraft. Now, the reason I think it's going to be this one, even though, unfortunately, it would mean the jobs would go to Kansas instead of here to Jacksonville, is because there's only one reason, to my mind, that the Air Force would foresee a need for a manned version of this type of an aircraft. They're foreseeing having to operate in contested environments. They're foreseeing having to conduct these missions where they don't have 100% air superiority, which means you can rule out Iraq, you can rule out Afghanistan, you can rule out, there's no way in the world they'd put one of these up in the air in Syria. That only leaves one place, and that's down here. Because they couldn't guarantee air superiority in Venezuela for a good long time. And if Brazil goes communist, which it's looking like it's going to, the only safe place for the U.S. to operate out of would be Colombia. And given that the A-29, the Super Tuck, is a Brazilian aircraft, I don't think that they would want there to be the idea of anybody confusing our A-29s versus their A-29s. So that's why I think it's going to be the Beechcraft AT-6, just so there's a distinguishing factor between these low-level attack aircraft. And you would have to ask the question then, well, why wouldn't we use the higher level assets? Apparently it's a money issue, in the sense that maybe they foresee the idea that perhaps possibly they could lose an aircraft or two. They could have some shot down because there are Russian anti-air systems in Venezuela. So, you lose a Beechcraft, an AT-6 or an A-29, not the end of the world. You lose an F-35, an F-117, kind of a big deal. So I think that's what that report is really saying without saying it. And you can read about that manned versus unmanned argument in SPS Aviation. Because I had to think about that for myself. I'm like, why would they just not, if it's really just a recon mission or just to attack put a missile on a drug den or terror, why wouldn't they just use drones? Why the only thing that a manned aircraft has over a drone is the ability to do air-to-air or to avoid. And we don't have that technology quite yet. I mean, it's getting there, but it's not where it needs to be. So this is the one I think they're going to be choosing in December. The AT-6 from Beechcraft. This is a battle aircraft, but I just don't think they want to be operating a Brazilian aircraft if they're going to be perhaps having to deal with the Brazilians militarily. Because it's going to be a tough thing. I know the Brazilians have been our ally, but the Venezuelans were our ally. And look where we're at now. We've got Washington Post articles that are talking about how they're still a threat. And this is the most ridiculous thing, and I'll leave with this. Of all of the things out there that you can be reading about, talking about in the news, this story is unique in this one aspect. No matter whether you talked to someone from Fox News or CNN, they would give you the same story. That's what should make you worry. Donald Trump and Barack Obama, shoulder to shoulder, absolutely zero light between them on this story in Venezuela. If you look at how the initial sanctions were put down back in 2015 and how they are continued now, you see absolutely no difference. And when you look at the reporting from Fox News and you look at the reporting from CNN or Washington Post, you see the exact same thing. You would think you would see a completely different take on this, and you don't. And this article here is Venezuela Analysis that talks about that as well. How still the quote-unquote left in America is calling Venezuela a threat to the world. Because of apparently all of the refugees that are fleeing, when literally we're seeing stories of the exact opposite. And even if that were the case, why wouldn't that make Colombia an enormous threat to the world? They had the largest displaced internally refugee group of people in the world for many, many, many years. And they were going all over the world. Excuse me. So definitely something else is going on here. I don't think this is back burner at all. And I think there is some very serious talk going on now about when, not if, the U.S. has to pull the trigger on Venezuela. And has to in their mind. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying there. Because at some point, they're going to either have to lift the sanctions and say we were wrong, or they're going to have to take it to the next level. Because they're not going to go down another road with Cuba, where you sanction a country for 50 years to zero avail, to absolutely no effect whatsoever. But it's just very telling, I think, that the Air Force was looking at craft like this. Manned attack aircraft, propeller driven, that wouldn't be too expensive to lose. I can only think of one place, and in one situation you would want a manned version of this type of an asset, and that's in contested airspace. So we will leave it there. 11 minutes. But thank you guys so much for the support. Appreciate it. Like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.